I don't know if anyone actually went out and got the book when I shared it, but if you did, I am on chapter 2 of Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. Dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present. And the first 2 chapters talk a lot about the colonial experimentation that happened in the early developments of the medical industrial complex in America. Crazy thing for me as I'm reading, one of the first accounts in chapter 1 is by Frederick Gardner, a peripatetic Mormon physician. I was raised Mormon. Talks about his travel memoirs and his impressions of the 19th century slave markets of Washington, D.C. Paints a Candyland like Fantasyland picture of what being a slave was like, kind of introducing the argument that a lot of slaveholders use, that it would be against their own interests to brutally treat their slaves. Now, this goes directly against the evidence. We know that slaves were brutalized, they were tortured, they were experimented on. What Harriet A. Washington goes on to say, that rather the medical interests of the slave were often diametrically opposed to the interests of his owner and of American physicians. Then goes on to say the point of this chapter's unflattering praise of nascent American medicine is not to castigate it for its primitivism, but to put Blacks' historical aversion to medical care into context, for most antebellum Blacks were subjected to Southern medicine. It talks a lot about the racist beliefs of medical professionals back then that we often see today in the medical profession still. Belief that Black people don't feel as much pain, that they have a higher pain tolerance. My medical school had a class that taught a lot about medical racism. I'm not even sure if they're still going to be teaching it after this year. The quote that I want to leave you with is that the experimental abuse of African Americans was not a cultural anomaly. Even today, we will have individual cases of abuse coming out of hospitals. You had the white nurse that was breaking the bones of Black babies. These are not just random acts of violence. Simply mirrored in the medical arena the economic, social, and health abuses that the larger society perpetuated against people of color, especially in the slaveholding states. Violence and the biases that we have today that are still rampant within our medical system are simply a mirror of our larger societal beliefs. I'm going to keep sharing little bits as I go through this. Again, I'm trying to be a medical student at the same time, so I will be going through this book pretty slowly, but go to Libby, go to bookshop.org, pick yourself up a copy because I think this is an integral piece of education that every healthcare professional should have.